welcome to History on Blast, episode 35, Seize the Means of Production. I'm Hillary, and in today's episode, I'll be your host as we put Pharaoh Rameses III on blast for honestly failing to properly feed and pay his workers. But first, this month in history. On January 3rd, 1924, the British Egyptologist Howard Carter found the sarcophagus of King Tutankhamun. While he and his team had discovered the tomb 2 years before, it took them some time to make their way through the other chambers. This find was extremely rare due to the fact that the tomb had not been plundered, and as a result, it led to a fad of baby names related to the boy king's modern nickname, Tut.
Hi, I'm Kay, a musical theater nerd. Are you someone with a deep passion for musical theater? Is your significant other, best friend, or some other special someone in your life someone who knows nothing about it? Does it drive you nuts? If so, join us every Wednesday for Tone Deaf, a theater nerd's guide for their musically challenged spouse, where I subject my husband, Warren,
that's me,
to musicals in front of a captive listening audience.
I'm only slightly scared.
Tune in every Wednesday for Tone Deaf.
Alright, so let's talk a little bit about ancient Egypt. So specifically, we're talking about the reign of Pharaoh Rameses III, which specifically puts us in the New Kingdom. Now, I'm sure you're fairly used to the concept of ancient Egypt and the way that they're viewed from a modern perspective. For the most part, we know about pyramids and tombs and mummies and, curses and chariots and fun stuff like that. The Egyptians weren't actually obsessed with death in the way that people seem to think, for the most part. It's actually more accurate to say they were obsessed with the idea of living life to its fullest, and they viewed death as just another facet of life. That the life that we live now is sort of a, phase one caterpillar kind of deal. And then you die, you're mummified, and you move on to a place called the Field of Reeds, or Sekhet Aaru, which is ruled over by the god Osiris, who is absolutely not Anubis, and the two of them should not be confused. Osiris's deal is actually ruling over the dead. He was mythologically believed to be the first pharaoh of Egypt, as opposed to Anubis, whose whole deal is mummification and the weighing of the heart on the scales against the feather of truth, which, if you, like me, have seen the classic Sesame Street feature-length film, Don't Eat the Pictures, you will note that they got this detail wrong. Not because they measured the heart against one of Big Bird's feathers, but because they had Osiris be the one doing the measuring, which is just inherently wrong. But that's not important. What is important is that during the New Kingdom, the ancient Egyptians believed in a sort of treatise on death known as the Book of Going Forth by Day. And what this provides us with is the framework that they believed was necessary to maintain the order of the universe. Order was extremely important, and basically if you don't follow all the right steps, if you don't have all the right passwords, if you don't do every single thing correctly, you will not be reborn-ish. You will not continue on to the next phase of your life. And another important part of this is that the soul requires a physical body to return to in order to sustain the Ba, or the soul. That would also be why there would be funerary offerings made for certain people, including the pharaohs, up to centuries after their deaths. They would actually establish these cults of worship that would worship them for the express purpose of bringing them food. And the idea there is that the soul would feed on this food. And in order to do that, you need to have a tomb, which brings us around to the actual topic of our episode today, which is the 1152 BCE strike of the workers in the town of Deir el-Medina, which is its modern Arabic name. The name that it would have had in the New Kingdom is Set Ma'at, and that translates to the place of truth. Deir el-Medina, or Set Ma'at, was a town built for the workers who were constructing the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. You will know that an Egyptian monarch was interred in the Valley of the Kings because their burial place will be referred to as KV and then a number, which sort of says where they are in the valley. So, like KV5 or whatever. So, here we are in Deir el-Medina, a bustling settlement full of artisan workers, because contrary to the popular image, the builders of the pharaonic tombs in the Valley of the Kings were not just artisan craftsmen, they were masters. In order to craft these tombs, they had to be well educated at the height of their art. And they were given this housing, they were given food and beer, actually, as their payment predominantly. But it was extremely important that they be good at what they do and capable of keeping a secret. Because if someone were to say, rob all of these tombs, they would get a whole lot of gold and gems and stuff. Because the pharaoh's tombs are very much a case of you can bring it with you. So, here we are in 1152 BCE, during the reign of Rameses III. The workers are, let's go with frustrated, which honestly is reasonable. It's the 5th month of the year, and their payment in the form of, the food they all need to live and, their families that live with them is 4 weeks late. And then in the 6th month, the food is 2 weeks, it doesn't arrive until 2 weeks into the 6th month. So the deliveries of their food is extremely erratic. Everything is showing up late. There isn't enough. It's sort of a mess. And it's commonly believed that the primary reason things were so messy wasn't, there wasn't a famine, there was no kind of drought or anything that would make sense, that would provide an actual reason for this food to be late. It was just corruption in the cities. So, the workers decided to do what, honestly, any modern union worker would recognize. They went on strike. So, what's a strike? According to dictionary.com, a strike is a refusal to work organized by a body of employees as a form of protest, typically in an attempt to gain a concession or concessions from their employer. It's honestly a fairly straightforward concept. The idea is that, your employer requires workers in order to actually get anything done. And if the workers are unhappy, there really is very little preventing them from just getting up and not doing the work. Which is exactly what the tomb builders of Deir el-Medina decided to do. They had complained quite a bit, and after repeated late arrivals of payment, they decided to just put all their tools down and get up and leave the dig site. And the really funny part of that is that it was recorded by a scribe and one of these artisan workers named Amenacht, that the supervisors didn't actually know where they'd gone, which is kind of a hilarious image, because I just want you to picture being like a supervisor on a construction site and you turn around and there's no one there. All of the hammers and stuff are just sitting around, and there's somebody's hard hat. Like, there's a helmet just sitting right there, and where are literally all of the workers? They're gone. What they actually did is they marched on one of the temples of Ramses III, which, the ancient Egyptians considered their pharaoh to be a god, so of course he has temples. So they arrive at this temple, and the vizier of the area kind of goes, oh, shit. Because, remember, the tombs are important. Without the tomb, you don't have the vehicle to that second life, and the pharaoh has to get there, or the pharaoh doesn't, sort of transcend this life to become the next Ra, or Horus, or Horus Ra, or whoever the sun god is this dynasty. And then the sun will stop rising, the Nile will stop flooding, and life as we know it will be over, and everything will be desert and chaos. And the big snake will win, because that's more or less what their religion taught. So they take this complaint to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh's like, oh shit, because he also knows all of this. And, well, it turns out they decided to not only pay the workers, but increase their wages. Now, part of the reason that this worked so well is that because when they staged this walk-off, it was basically the first ever walk-off and strike. At the very least, it's the first one in recorded history. And the supervisors, the viziers, the pharaoh, they all kind of looked at the situation and went, oh shit, they can do that. They can do that. They can just get up and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Oh no. And it's not even like they could turn around and do what later strikes would have to worry about and hire scab labor, which would be, a scab is a worker who is taking the job of a person who is on strike. Typically, they're very looked down upon by unions. But because this tomb building was such an art that you had to be a master to be able to do, they couldn't just fill people into the role. They had to concede, which means that effectively in 1152 BCE, a bunch of artists and stonemasons and crafters managed to force the literal God King, the son of the sun himself, to concede, because they realized that they had that power. And it's impressive. It's astounding. And it's something to think about and look back on as a forerunner of the strike actions that would happen later in the industrial era, when we start getting to strikes that lead to the outlawing of child labor and leave us with the idea of the 8-hour workday, as opposed to periods when people would be working a 12-hour workday. And in a way, it's all thanks to the people in Deir el-Medina. So that's going to do it for us this week. As always, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, episode suggestions, anything at all, You can find me at History on Blast on Twitter, or you can email me at historyonblast@gmail.com. If you want to take part in discussions, share history memes, contribute to, sometimes I'll put up a poll for what sort of episodes I'm going to have coming up. All of that you can find in the History on Blast discussion group on Facebook. As always, I'd like to thank Defy Them All for the use of their song Keeper of Histories for the intro and outro of our program. And thank you for listening.